it seems like plenty of you want breakdowns for the non-new weapons. No complaints here. Since I've already done one of each of the class's secondaries, I think I'll continue with the secondaries. And Scout's Shoddy is going first because, to be honest, there's an issue I want to cover with the Boomstick. Boomstick's firing mechanics are pretty damn simple. It shoots a large number of pellets in a wide RNG spread. Looking at the spread itself, we can see it usually fits inside the reticle. Except not always. The actual spread is big enough that sometimes pellets escape that range by a little bit. I don't know if that's a bug with the spread or something intentional to promote getting really up close. But either way, up close is obviously where you want to use this. Each time it fires, it also creates a cone-shaped shockwave that extends 4 meters in front of you. The shockwave does 20 damage at base, which is enough to kill swarmers, and that's basically all you want out of it. There is a mod to increase it to 40, but it's competing with Super Blowthrough and doesn't really hit important breakpoints. Unless you are absolutely desperate for plus 20 damage per shot, you should take Blowthrough here. It provides a ton of value. The next thing to notice with the Boomstick is that, at base, it has a very low rate of fire and a pretty slow reload. And with that, we're already getting into the issue with this gun that I wanted to talk about. On paper, there's a pretty clear choice between these two mods. Double Trigger gives you a lot of burst damage, while Quickfire Ejector lets you reload faster, so if you need to shoot repeatedly, you wind up on top. Burst versus sustained damage output. But that's not actually how it works out. To show this, here's Double Trigger on the left and Quickfire Ejector on the right. Both are about to fire the second and last shot before reloading at the exact same time. Did you see that? Slow motion this time. As you can see, Double Trigger gets to start reloading earlier. So much earlier, in fact, that Quickfire Ejector's advantage is mostly nullified. To understand what's happening here, you have to understand something fundamental to guns in Deep Rock in general. Every time you fire a weapon in this game, you obviously can't instantly fire again. There's a delay before the next shot. The delay is based on your weapon's rate of fire stat, naturally, so you can display it like this. 1 over x, where x equals rate of fire. So, a weapon like the platform gun, with a rate of fire of 1, has a firing delay of 1 over 1, or 1 second. Boomstick, by default, has a rate of fire of 1.5. So the firing delay is 1 over 1.5, which is 0.66 repeating. 2/3 of a second. If you take Double Trigger, it's increased all the way up to 9 rate of fire, 6 times what it was before, making the firing delay 1 over 9, or 0.11 repeating. Here's the problem. This delay after shooting doesn't just prevent you from firing another shot for the duration, it also prevents you from reloading. So, effectively, every weapon that reloads in this game has a delay after shooting before they're allowed to start their reload, and the duration of this delay depends on that weapon's rate of fire stat. Higher rate of fire means less reload delay. For most weapons, this is pretty minor, but it's pretty significant for Boomstick for a couple reasons. The first is that the Boomstick only fires 2 shots before reloading, and generally speaking, you either deal with the situation in 1 shot, or, if you don't, you want to either immediately fire the second, or switch weapons. Which is to say, you usually reload Boomstick after firing both shots, which means you're reloading after a shot, and the reload delay is pretty much always present. The second is that there's a huge difference between the rate of fire with and without double trigger. As a result, the difference in the delay is huge, over half a second. These both combine to create a situation where, in any situation where reload time on Boomstick actually matters, double trigger is effectively shaving 0.55 seconds off your reload time, on top of its intended benefit of much faster burst damage. So, instead of the 0.7 second faster reload it's supposed to have, Quickfire Ejector effectively only has a 0.15 second faster reload compared to the competition. That's less than a fourth the time advantage it's supposed to have. The difference between these two in reload time is not just small, it's so small that the increased rate of fire, despite only lasting for 2 shots before a reload happens, is enough to make double trigger actually put out shots faster, even when firing and reloading repeatedly. So it doesn't just have better burst damage, it also has better sustained volume of fire. So if you want to pull out your shotgun for 2 shots worth of big burst damage, double trigger is superior. And if you want to reload and continue firing your shotgun at tanky targets or swarms of grunts, it's still superior. I normally try to take a relatively unbiased outlook on build choices in this game, but this is kind of a special case, so I'll be blunt. If you actually plan on shooting things with the Boomstick, which you should not ever take Quickfire Ejector. You should always take double trigger. It's just better. Trust me on this one, if you have been using Quickfire Ejector, switching to double trigger may feel noticeably slower, because once the reload animation starts, it's not as fast. But due to that reload delay beforehand, they wind up with basically the same timing. Except with double trigger, you can unload a lot of damage in a way faster time frame. There is exactly one exception to this, but it's an overclock which is really bad in the first place. Double barrel. Double barrel makes the Boomstick fire both barrels in an extremely quick burst, with just a couple frames of delay in between the shots. It also gives each pellet +1 damage as a small bonus. Theoretically, the advantage here is that since you're getting the fire barrels quickly effect from the overclock slot, you don't have to spend your tier 2 mod on that, and so you can take Quickfire Ejector instead. And in doing that, essentially you'd have both double trigger and Quickfire Ejector at the same time. So, while your ammo economy becomes terrible against weak enemies since you're forced to fire 2 shots, you'll have really good sustained damage against tanky targets, right? Well, no. You might have predicted this with what I just covered, but the problem here is that double barrel's effect, unlike the double trigger mod, doesn't boost your rate of fire stat. As a result, it suffers from the same bad 2/3 of a second long reload delay that Quickfire Ejector builds always have, and that means it doesn't actually get most of the on-paper sustained fire benefit. Carl.gg and the DPS calculator program don't account for this, and so they will show erroneously high sustained DPS numbers for double barrel. But in reality, the sustained rate of fire on this thing is only just barely better than a no overclock boomstick that just equips double trigger. And you totally fuck your ammo economy to get there, and you also spend your overclock slot. I know that people want to believe in this overclock for the Doom Guy double barrel fantasy, but it's bad. It's really, really bad. Don't use this unless you actually want to be weaker. I almost feel like I made a mistake not making it clear how bad this actually is all the way back in the gigachad 0% ammo efficiency scout video. There's a lot of comments under there that seem to have missed the joke and are under the mistaken impression that double barrel, and also super cooling chamber, are actually good for killing beefy bugs. Of course, most of these people aren't doing anything wrong, they're just missing information. But some people are spreading stuff around which is outright false. Hey, did you know? With Double Barrel, you can take the heat mod and hit a frozen target with 2 shots at once before it thaws, unlike normal Boomstick that would thaw it out on the first shot. Oh, what? It doesn't work that way? Double Barrel doesn't actually shoot both shots at the same time, so it still thaws on the first shot like normal? Oh. Super Cooling Chamber gives you double damage for sacrificing a mere third of your ammo. It literally increases your ammo efficiency. How is this community so bad at basic math? That's a really insightful observation, Monica M. You must have noticed that this overclock gives a bit over plus 100% focus shot damage. That's like double damage. Wow. Oh, what? It doesn't fucking work that way? It's not a unique multiplier, but instead it's an increase to the focus shot multiplier for the M1000? The focus shot multiplier that starts at 200%? I don't know if you realize this, but if you increase 200 by anything less than 200, you aren't doubling it, and so this boost is a lot lower than it first appears if you're not paying attention. Maybe when you help the community out with their basic math, you can also brush up on your reading comprehension. I've seen a lot of people make that mistake, and then spread it around and confuse new players. So let me emphasize, Super Cooling Chamber does not increase focus shot damage by 125%. It only increases it by 62.5%. Deep Rock players, I am begging you, collectively. When you come up with an idea for a build or whatever, please actually try it to see if it works how you think it works, instead of just assuming it will be good and then recommending it to people. And on the other side of the coin, Ghost Ship Games, I am also begging you, more sincerely this time, please patch out how firing delay also delays reloads, and replace it with a standardized reload delay of like 0.1 seconds or something. It would fix the imbalance between Double Trigger and Quickfire Ejector, and also would be a big indirect buff to Double Barrel. Putting aside Double Barrel and Super Cooling Chamber, now it's time to cover the remaining mods. In both Tier 1 and Tier 3, we have a choice between damage or ammo. Well, also this stun mod, but it's pretty terrible in comparison. The stun chance is per pellet, so you already consistently get stuns with meat shots even without this mod, and a bit more stun time isn't anywhere near as good as the damage or ammo in this tier. Frankly, any combination of damage and ammo is workable here on these tiers, but I do recommend taking high capacity shells. It's effectively a 37.5% damage increase, which is incredibly good, and since it's increasing damage by increasing the number of pellets you fire, it also makes your shots more consistent. Then if you want more ammo, you can do what I usually do, which is take ammo in Tier 1. Alternatively, you could have a bit less killing power and a bit more ammo if you take Tier 1 damage and Tier 3 ammo, but I think you're a little worse off that way. And of course, you can go max ammo by taking both ammo mods, or max damage with both damage mod. But both these routes limit what targets you can go up against effectively. If you cut things down the middle while your range is limited, you can use the gun against all kinds of targets effectively in that range. Grunts, swarmers, big boys, the works. Taking full ammo means that you're mostly limited to killing just grunts and swarmers, while taking full damage limits you to just shooting BV enemies because otherwise you'll run out. Oh, and this armor breaking mod also exists. I think it's not really a good fit for this weapon in general. You might want to take it on elimination sometimes, just because of twins, but otherwise, again, like this one, it loses to blow through pretty heavily. Lastly, we have the Tier 5 mods, and the most significant one here is White Phosphorus. This mod causes a lot of confusion because it seems similar to PGL's Heat mod. PGL's Heat mod cuts your direct damage in half in exchange for heat. This one doesn't. You don't lose direct damage. Instead, half of your direct damage becomes fire-type damage. This means that it does extra damage to enemies that are weak to it, like most Mactera, as well as Spitballers, Corlock Sprouts, and all grunt versions on Glacial Strata. That's just the direct damage. You also inflict heat equal to the raw amount of fire damage you inflict, so you also do extra damage over time. You don't do more or less based on how much fire damage the enemy actually takes. By that I mean that hitting weak points or fire vulnerable enemies won't make you inflict extra heat. The heat is just always equal to half of each pellet's original damage stat. Conversely, hitting armor won't reduce the heat you do, which is why you can light oppressors on fire through their heavy armor. You do lose damage against some enemies, a little bit against guards, and a substantial amount against oppressors, but it's very worth it regardless. It gives you quite a bit of extra killing power most of the time, and the damage over time is extremely useful for finishing off enemies that would otherwise just barely survive. Usually the only time you should avoid this mod is on elimination missions, because Dreadnoughts have a ton of fire resist. Your only other options here in Tier 5 are a Fear mod, which is not great at only 50% fear power within 5 meters, and then a mod that is redundant if you use Born Ready. And you should use Born Ready because it's really good in general, especially with a weapon like this, which is very bursty but runs out almost immediately. So that's the gun without overclocks. It's very short-ranged, but is useful against both groups and tanky enemies. Simple, but versatile. How about the other overclocks? The ones that aren't double-barrel? Well, I'm pleased to say they're all at least fairly good. They all have at least one reasonable use, and none of them really just outcompete the others. So, minus one stinker, this gun has a pretty good overclock selection. Let's start with the other cleans. There's 3 of them: compact shells, stuffed shells, and special powder. Compact shells gives a hefty +6 max ammo, and a small -0.2 reload time. The first of those is more important, but there's nothing wrong with faster reload either. This is sort of an unassuming overclock, but honestly it's quite strong. 6 extra ammo goes a long way on this weapon. Stuffed Shells is a straightforward damage upgrade, in both of the ways that have been introduced so far with the mods: damage and pellet count. While it's just +1 to each, that goes a decent distance here. On a setup like this, it's +18.18% damage, and a bit more consistency as well from the added pellet. If you liked the small damage boost that Double Barrel had, this with Double Trigger is pretty much just a better version of that. Either one of those overclocks are straightforward and easy to splash onto any build. The last clean, however, is much more of a game changer than clean overclocks usually are. It's special powder, and if we're being real here, this doesn't really need any introduction. We all know what this does. Launch yourself across the cave at extreme speeds, save yourself from fall damage, accidentally blast your teammates when you flick backwards to launch yourself towards the drop pod. The actual practicality of Special Powder varies a lot by cave and mission type. It loves big open spaces, and is a lot less valuable within small tunnels. Very nice to have on point extraction, as well as stuff like high complexity mining or egg missions. But, of course, regardless of the practical value it always brings a lot of fun value, and there's no point in pretending that doesn't exist. It's a clean anyways, and an actual clean, unlike a certain unstable disguised as a clean, so you don't risk much by equipping it. What more is there to say? If you like launching yourself around, throw it on. Boomstick only has one balanced and one unstable overclock. The balanced is shaped shells. This thing has gone through a lot of changes. It used to only give minus 35% spread, and also minus 2 pellets, which neutered your damage output pretty terribly. Then it got buffed up to minus 50% spread and minus 1 pellet per shot, and then the minus 1 pellet was replaced entirely with a moderate minus 4 ammo downside. Comparing it now to what it was before is an insane glow up. The ammo penalty is felt, but a lot less than the reduced pellet count was. Meanwhile, the tighter spread is more impactful than it might seem at first, even if the pellets do sometimes still go a bit outside the reticle. The most useful aspect is chunking Mactera from a distance, making this a pretty nice pick for Mactera swarm missions. Lastly, the one unstable overclock, Jumbo Shells. A huge damage upgrade coupled with a big ammo penalty and longer reload. This is the Unga Bunga Caveman Brain Shotgun OC. Jumbo Shells can actually get slightly more ammo and slightly more damage per shot compared to no overclock if you go full ammo, so it can be a generalist overclock if you want, at the cost of a bit of reload time. But we all know why you're here. It doesn't matter if it's actually good to do that. You don't take Jumbo Shells for a moderate power boost. You take Jumbo Shells for big damage.
5 minutes.